Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is Pomerol Partner. Today, we're going to talk to you about deeper insights for SAP core infrastructure data. Pomerol Partners was actually founded in London in 2013, founded by a number of members of Deutsche Bank. Strong history in the Tier 1 financial services arena. Came to the US about a year and a half ago, and we've rapidly expanded multiple offices in the US. We're also part of the Qlik Advisories Council, and we're one of their top partners for financial services. The next thing that we started getting into was manufacturing, and in particular, SAP data in the manufacturing space. Start off today just talking about the difference of Qlik and what makes Qlik different. One of the things that you'll hear a lot about is the associative difference, so the ability to see all of your data, to interact with that data without predefined drill paths, and really, because Qlik is all in memory, seeing your data with the speed of thought. So it's really all about answering the next question. The old school way of doing and analytics and business intelligence was you built cubes, you had predefined drill paths, you had predefined aggregation levels. With Qlik, because of the associative model, I'm actually able to drill into any different section of the application and use that as a filter, and then I can aggregate by any of those different dimensions. So I don't have to predefine cubes. I'm not stuck in the process of rebuilding and rerunning those cubes just in order to do an analysis. And if I change my mind on what I want to group by, I would have to rebuild a cube. With Qlik, I don't have to do that. It's all part of the application. Another way that this manifests itself is my traditional query-based tools really suffer from having an inner join. So if I have data quality issues or I have something that doesn't necessarily match up, because it's an inner join, that data is going to drop out. So you see here, traditional tool only sees $600 worth of sales, where Qlik sees the whole picture, and that's $1,000 worth of sales. And then I easily see at a glance that there is some data that's actually missing. There's a sales rep that's missing. We've even had clients that have managed to save millions of dollars in expenses just due to the miscategorization of their expense claims and expense items. So a really important feature of Qlik is that full union outer join for all of the data that you're bringing into the application. Another key differentiator of Qlik is the fact that it's completely built on APIs. So there are a lot of different levels of security because of that. There's network security. You can use server security integrated with your Active Directory, different processes, and then application level security. So you can do row and column level security, and you can secure those even more fully using a rules-based engine for doing the authorization of what people are allowed to see. No discussion of Qlik would be complete without talking about how Qlik addresses big data. So big data is something that people are talking a lot about, and there's a lot of different ways of approaching it with Qlik, because Qlik is truly a platform, and it's extensible, but also there's a lot of different ways that you can use Qlik. So one is called on-demand app generation, so I can actually build a summary level application, and then have that drill into a more detailed level application. I can chain different documents together, so different lines of business might be chained together. I click on a link from one, it takes me to the other without even realizing, or the end user even realizing, that they're going to between different applications. I can segment the data. I can use all of the data in memory. So Qlik is very efficient in how it processes all of the rows of data. So I don't necessarily have to rely on these different techniques. And then also direct data discovery. So if I've got billions of records in a transactional type system, or I've got call commentary in a CRM system or something like that, I can actually use Qlik to do most of the business intelligence kinds of things, like the aggregations. And then when I want to go in and I want to read those detailed call notes, I can leave those directly in the database, and I'm not moving that data needlessly. As I mentioned, Qlik was built from the ground up on an API kind of methodology. So everything in in the Qlik suite or the Qlik platform is available through an API. As such, there's been Qlik created an open source community called Qlik Branch. And in Qlik Branch, you can find a number of different ways that people have extended the application. So if you like the D3.js visualization library, you'll see that there's an extension out there that will allow you to add in any of those visualizations. You can leverage the Qlik engine for doing the number crunching and for doing the aggregations on the fly for the ETL components of Qlik. But the visualizations themselves can leverage that D3.js library. And there's a whole host of other applications out there that are in this open source community called Branch. So it's branch.qlik.com. Another way that you can experiment with the different APIs is to go to the playground. So playground.qlik.com. And in the playground, you can actually see all of the different APIs that work. So there's APIs for doing the management of the server. There's APIs for accessing all of the visualization types. There's APIs for accessing hypercubes you can create inside of a Qlik application. So it's really a developer's playground, not to be redundant there, but a great way of seeing what the true power is of the Qlik platform. And then there's the Qlik market. So as you would imagine, it's market.qlik.com. And in the Qlik market, there are actually companies, including Pomerol, that have built applications that we and others resell through that market. So because of the way that Qlik is developed and because of that platform mindset, there are ways for us to build fully functioning solutions that you can download and you can use on your own. So I would encourage you to check those out. We also talked about how SAP fits in and how data and analytics fits in with the future of analytics. So I think AI is probably one of the single biggest things that we're hearing a lot about these days. And when we're talking about Qlik, I think a lot of organizations think about AI, but I don't think a lot of them are actually going to get to that pure artificial intelligence. But what they really need is augmented intelligence. They need faster access to the data, and they need to be able to make better decisions on that data. So one of the things in keeping with the theme of Qlik as a platform and the extensibility of it is Qlik has what's referred to as the Advanced Analytics Toolkit. So I can leverage R, I can leverage Python, and I can do a number of different really advanced statistical analyses on these. And you can see just the headings of some of those advanced analysis types. But I can do those either in batch fashion. So I'm loading the data in and I'm pulling it in from my source systems. Maybe I want to do a market basket analysis or a forecasting analysis, or I can put in kind of ad hoc mode. So in this case, it might be a little bit difficult to see, but up in the upper left-hand corner, I've actually put or selected just one particular customer. And then dynamically, my forecasting changed, and this forecast is actually based off of one of the R models. It's based off of the whole winter's forecast analysis. So if I were to change the customer, then my forecast would change. If I were to change the customer and the product, I would see a forecast based on those different types. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Helwig, and he's going to jump into a deeper dive into the SAP analytics that the Pomerol partners has developed.
All right. Thank you, John. I'm going to change things over here a little bit, so everyone just bear with me. All right. Let's see my screen now. And John, if you can chime in and just give me a heads up that that's working on your end, this will be great, and we'll get started. All right. Is there a heads up, John? Good to go? Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, John. Appreciate it, and glad you guys are able to take some time to join us today. I'm going to transition now over into a specific set of solution accelerators that Pomerol Partners has built specifically for SAP using the Qlik platform. So what we're going to go through today, let me just give you a quick overview on the agenda. Is I'm going to give you a brief overview on what is this solution set, this set of accelerators that bundled together we call cross-module analytics. So what is it? We'll talk briefly about what is the problem that it solves. What is its position in the marketplace, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how it goes about doing that. And then at that point, we'll transition and we'll actually go into demo mode, and I'll pull up a couple of the different applications and step you through them so that you have an understanding as to exactly how cross-module analytics and these particular applications really work and can really help streamline and reduce the amount of time it takes to get data out of your SAP environment and get meaningful analysis from it. So that's how we'll step through it. So first things first, let's talk about what is cross-module analytics. And the way we like to put it is we just like to say this is a better, faster, and it's a more cost-effective way to really help SAP users make decisions from the data that's in many cases kind of trapped or buried inside of your SAP deployment. So at the highest level, there's a couple of, there's really two levels or two aspects to the cross-module analytics solution that we're going to talk about. The first is this layer here that we call the data acquisition and management platform. And this is just a simplified way of being able to leverage Qlik and the robust ETL capabilities that are there, along with our expertise and understanding of the SAP data models that they use to be able to combine these together and pull data out and then house it and store it here so that you can use it for analytical purposes. Think of this essentially as your Qlik-powered kind of data warehouse with SAP data that sits inside of it. The second component are these pre-built solution accelerator applications that we've pre-built and put on top of it. So the way I like to put it is when you go through this two-step process, we pull data in from your SAP environment, we get it prepped and readied for you, and then that lights up any of these particular applications that you want to fire up and put in the hands of your SAP users to streamline the decision-making process. Okay, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. When we talk about what problem does this really solve? Well, as we go around and we talk to more and more companies that are using SAP in their production environment, we tend to hear a recurring theme, and that is that, number one, it takes a sledgehammer to get your data into SAP, but conversely, it takes a jackhammer to get data out of SAP. So it's a lot of work. People invest a tremendous amount of time and energy investing in setting SAP up and then operationalizing it and making it the day-to-day. And then it also takes a tremendous amount of investment and time to get data out of it so that they can really improve the decision-making process. And I would say that there's two key themes that we find when we talk to companies running SAP. The first is that nobody gets in it on the cheap. Okay, they're heavily invested in their SAP environment. So that's one theme. And then the second theme is that it tends to always be more complex than they would have expected it to be, certainly when it comes to organizing, structuring, and extracting data from their system. And that's really what became the genesis for trying to get cross-module analytics into the marketplace, particularly when we see the power of the Qlik platform and the way that it's able to tap into data sources, pull data together, and make meaningful analysis out of that data. So let's talk about the way that SAP is structured today and why this is problematic when it comes to getting data out of your SAP environment. So first of all, most SAP ERP customers are really honed in on two different methods today for getting information out of SAP. The first, as you might expect, would be to use the operational reports that come out of SAP. Now, SAP, as most of you I'm sure are aware of, is very what we'll call modularized. You can buy the production planning module, you buy the financials module, you buy the materials management module. So it's very modularly oriented. And as such, SAP has written their operational reports expecting that you may have one module, but not knowing if you'll have another module. So you tend to get these one-to-one reports. So if I want a purchasing report, I go after tables that are oriented around purchase orders. But if I want a goods receipt report, I go after tables oriented around goods receipt, et cetera, et cetera. However, things get a little complicated as soon as I try to look at things like spend and now I have purchasing data and I might have invoice data that live in two different places. So that's immediately where kind of the house of cards starts to fall down with SAP's reporting environment. So again, your insights are limited to a single module, and oftentimes these reports are run against, we say either a production or a production-like database, which means a lot of them can take a tremendous amount of time to process. There's one report in particular that we have clients that run that it's called the MD4C report. It can take 8 to 12 hours to complete one report. And oftentimes you run a report that long and it's obsolete by the time it's done running. So a simple way to get around this would be, oh, well, I know, well, let's just create a new ABAP report. Well, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of expertise, and there's a lot of complexity in getting that done. And a lot of companies are very leery of going down that true custom reporting kind of path. So the way SAP likes to position it then with their clients is they say, oh, great, no big deal. Why don't you come over here and we'll sell you BW, or now they'll sell you HANA as a mechanism in order to analyze that data. And with BW, you find yourself in one of those old legacy cube-based solutions like John was talking about earlier in the presentation. Or you go with HANA, which has attempted to create an in-memory solution, but it's very unproven and incredibly expensive. So sometimes you can look to third-party solutions such as Teradata and other Hadoop solutions. But with all of these environments, there's a tremendous amount of cost associated with buying the software licensing, certainly in getting them set up, and then there's a tremendous amount of complexity that just further increases your cost of maintenance and modifying things over time. So there's got to be a better way, right? We certainly believe there is, and this is what we've seen as we've brought this to the marketplace. What we've done is we've taken our expertise around the Qlik stack, the Qlik platform, if you will, and all the data that resides in it, and we figured out exactly where to go to get the right pieces of information out of SAP, bring it together into this Qlik-based extraction platform, and then again, as we talked about before, use it to light up a variety of different applications at the front end. There's some really key benefits to this particular approach. One is that these applications are pre-built, so you can essentially see them before you buy them, right? So many times in the business intelligence and in the analytics space, it's kind of imagine, if you will, this beautiful picture, and then you kind of go on faith that the consulting firm or the vendor is going to actually be able to execute on it. We don't have to worry about that here. We'll actually sit down and we'll show you the applications. We'll show you a couple of them today, so you can actually see what they look like. And the bottom line is, well, that's what you can get. So you don't have that guesswork. The other thing is that the applications are built around user-centric specific use cases. So we've talked to enough SAP users and understand and have understood their pain in how they do their jobs, and we've tried to architect these applications to specifically address those use cases so they can use them for real in the real world, and they adopt them a lot faster because they're much more attuned to the process that they're normally a part of anyway. As you might imagine, this third key benefit is that we are getting data again from different modules within SAP. So we're able to go across those different modules and combine data to give more meaningful and robust analysis that better fits the process. The time to value is significantly faster. The Qlik platform in and of itself lets us connect into the data very, very quickly. And a lot of this has already been pre-built so that we're able to leverage that prior expertise to speed up the time. Along with that, your cost is substantially less. The licensing tends to be less, and the services that go along with it are a lot less. And then kind of an added, we'll call it a throw-in bonus here, is that if you go down this path and you have the Qlik solution, that Qlik platform, that platform isn't limited to just SAP data. If you have third-party market data that you like to aggregate in, if you want to use data from the Qlik market, like weather data, and combine that with sales history and build more robust forecasts, all kinds of things. Even other ERP systems that might be running ancillary plants or operations in your ecosystem, we can bring all of that data together into the Qlik platform and combine it with your SAP data where there's appropriate meanings in the data. One other thing that we wanted to highlight today, and we've noticed this in the marketplace as we talk to more and more SAP companies, there are certain scenarios where there might be a functional leader within the business. Let's just say someone is in charge of procurement, and they really would like to use one of these applications, maybe our procurement and spend analysis app or our procurement price tracking app. But it's just an arduous task to go through IT and get approval for everything related to spinning up a new business intelligence or analytics environment. Well, we can make this easier for you. If that scenario fits your business, just reach out to us and talk to us. And what we can do is we can sit down and talk to you about which mechanisms you currently have in place in your SAP environment that would allow us to reach in and pull data and combine it and light up any one or multiple numbers of these different applications. For example, you might have business APIs or RFC read tables that are available that we can use. We can use any of these to tap in and pull data out. We can get a CSV file. We can put that into the Qlik environment and light up any of these applications on a one-off basis. And we can do this all in the cloud. So if you're running a functional department and you would really like to get a procurement app, there's ways for us to make this really, really frictionless with your IT department to get something spun up and running that won't necessarily take them away from any other predefined strategies that they might have in place. So we just want to highlight that, and certainly if that's your environment or you have concerns about that, reach out to us and let us know and we can help you through that. Okay. All right, with that, what we're going to do is I'm going to transition over a little bit here, and we are going to go into demo mode. So let me just pull this screen over here. Let this refresh for a second. All right. And what we're going to do, what we're looking at here is we're looking at something called the Conessent Hub. And I'll just change the format for us here a little bit. Let's go to the panel view. And when we look at this, you'll notice on the left-hand side, we've got some things called streams. And this is a way to organize these different applications and to invoke some security if necessary. So the most common example we see is for a client to create a bunch of, say, finance-related applications. So these could be all finance-related. So you could create a stream called finance, and then as people create new applications, you can publish them into the finance stream, and then people who have access to that stream will see all of those applications. It's a really nice, convenient way of kind of simplifying security. You can go a lot more granularity and security, but it's nice to know that you've got some more simplistic ways of organizing your applications as well. So in this case, I've got a stream for CMA or cross-module analytics apps. So there's 3 different apps that we've got in this stream. And then all I do is I click on one of those tiles, and what it's going to do is, in this case, it's going to pop open a new window, and it's going to take us in and let us take a look at the procurement app that we've put together. Now, this particular application is particularly important in the SAP world for a couple of different reasons. The first is that this is combining data that out of the box just doesn't come connected in SAP. So if you look at some of the fine print here, this is the key point we want to make. It's combining both invoice data that you're going to get out of your financial area, and it's combining purchase order information that's going to be generated through your procurement or your purchasing applications within your SAP environment. And again, in a typical world, you can report on one or the other independently, but it's really complicated to get a combined view as to what's going on in your operation. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a little lay of the land on what's going on. So we've got, this is called a sheet, and if I go up here to the top right, I can see a summary of the different base sheets that are included in this overall application. So you can see I've got a getting started sheet and an overview sheet, etc. And then you'll notice you've got my sheets. We'll come back to this in a minute as I show you guys how an individual user, given the right security privileges, can create some of their own sheets and then even potentially share that out to other users as you go through an authorization process. So in this case, I'm actually going to go directly to the overview sheet. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm actually going to start with some illustrations here and just show you how a little bit of this can change. So I'm going to change my screen resolution here. We'll see how everything is changing as I reorient the screen resolution. Qlik is which is what we're looking at right now, is a fully responsive application, which means I can look at this on, obviously various sized screens. I can look at it on an iPad, I can look at it on my phone, and it'll reorient the size of the application specifically to whatever device that you're looking at. What I want to highlight on this is a couple of different things. This sheet is giving us an overview of our total spend. Now, if I look at the total spend dollars, I look at my green selections down here, we'll get into this in a second. I've pre-selected a couple of green values, 2017, January through May. Okay. Now, I've also got data in other years that I can use from a comparative basis. And you can tell, because my total spend's 130 million compared to almost 2 billion, you can see I'm looking at a portion of 2017 versus all of my combined historical data. So as an end user, I'd obviously know, well, that's not what I want to do. Well, here's a shortcut. I've got this concept in Conessent called Bookmarks. If I click on the bookmark, I've pre-created current year to date versus last year to date. So if I click on that, it auto-selects a series of months in 2017, and I've got the same series of months in 2016. And what's nice about this is now I'm comparing apples to apples. So I've got basically my fiscal year starts October 1, I'm going through May, and I'm looking at the exact same time period in 2016, so I can get an apples to apples comparison. Okay. So in this environment, or in this with the numbers here, you'll see my total spend is down. Typically that's a good thing. And now what we've done is we've oriented the data to break it apart. Let you look at it as you kind of decompose it. And again, just getting that number in and of itself for most SAP customers is, it's an epiphany for them, because that's normally the culmination of a whole bunch of reports out of SAP and then a bunch of Excel jockeying to get to that particular number. So here what we've done is we do the first break by looking at the PO-based spend and non-PO based spend. And this is a really big deal for a lot of companies. In fact, we've got one prospect right now we're talking with. They're interested in this entire environment just for this one KPI alone, which is so convoluted and difficult for them to calculate in their current environment. So what we're looking at here is trying to understand where are people circumventing the purchase order approval process and going right to an invoice to spend dollars without potential authorization. Now, let's make no bones about it, there are going to be certain circumstances in your business where you don't need a purchase order to buy something, and we recognize that. But non-PO based spend certainly is an area of compliance that needs to be watched, because it is an area where there's a high degree of, let's just say, process deviations that you want to keep your eye on. So when we look at the number of purchase orders that are done in this particular environment where there's non-PO spend, or the number of invoices without a purchase order, we're at 97% compliance, which is really nice. But you'll see here in a few minutes that we can dive in and see exactly where some of the non-PO based invoices are coming from, and also exactly which vendors you're spending those dollars on. So that's the first breakdown. Then for PO-based spend, we like to look at material-based PO versus non-material-based purchase orders. And then we can also break it down even further to understand where do we need a goods receipt and where is there not a goods receipt. Again, a different classification when you're talking about items that need to be receipted into inventory. So we can break these down. We can see our comparisons, current year versus last year, again, based on our selections here. The other way that we break down spend over on the left side of the screen is we look at things based on settled invoices and open invoices. And this is a nice way to just get a perspective on, what dollars are out there just from a payables perspective. Where do things look like they're going to be? So in this case, we've got about 91 million that's left out there. You can see compared to the previous year, which you would expect, it's a significant increase in percentage. Again, that makes sense because last year was last year. But I can also immediately take a look and see these buckets in terms of days to pay. And this gives me a handle on understanding maybe we're paying a little too soon on some vendors and maybe too late on some others. So this is an easy way to get a quick snapshot or summary of how we're paying and what those data pay category buckets are. So this is our overview sheet. And what I'll do is, again, if I go back up here and kind of get a lay of the land, what we'll do is we're going to go on to our metric analysis and just give you a little bit of a perspective in terms of how the green, white, and gray associative experience works inside of Qlik. All right, so these are filter views or filter boxes that we've got here in front of us. So we've just got 4 of them. And everything's in white. There's a lot of data here clearly associated with one another. And in that typical environment that John was talking about in the first presentation, again, that old school method for doing business intelligence or analytics would be to create a drill path. Well, when you're in the Qlik environment, we don't have to create the drill paths. The data is all associated behind the scenes. So I can go in and I can just pick on a particular buyer, in this case Denise Com, and when I click on Denise, it's pre-sorted all the material or the items in these other particular filter boxes. And I can start to scroll down them and I can start to understand. She's got a lot of them, so let me go down here quite a ways. Keep scrolling here. We're going to get down to some that she's not associated with. Man, she's got a lot. Here, let's go back and take Denise off. So I just uncheck her from the top. Go down, let's take Arlie. Arlie doesn't have too many of them. And you can see here that, well, let's try one more. Just do the green, white, gray. I make my selection here. Commit that. Just scroll down just a little bit more. Here, we'll try Dustin. All right. We scroll back up on the vendors here. There we go. And I can start to see exactly which vendors are associated with Dustin as a buyer. Okay. All right, so you see here when I select Dustin, and Dustin's up here, we keep track of this popcorn trail. It automatically tells me exactly which vendors, which plants, which materials, etc. Now you can see I've got 3 plants that he's associated with, and when I click on that, I get a quick snapshot or preview for the other data as to what's associated with that selection. So for WHO2 for that plant, I've got 3 different materials or 3 different material selections here, and then I've got different vendors that are associated with that as well. And that's the beauty of this. I can go any direction I want. I don't have to follow a predefined drill path. It kind of goes along with our train of thought. And as you can tell, this isn't all scripted out. A typical user is going to get in here. They're going to get an inquiry about a buyer. They can click on the buyer and then they can just start to interact with the data. So I'm going to choose not to commit that. I'm going to take Dustin off. And you can change things on the front end really, really quickly. So if I'm a user and I want to just see total invoiced spend as opposed to the invoice count, I can click right on this particular button and I can change the metrics out. And this is a nice way to build out different parts of an application for end users to make it really easy for them. We let them explore the data that we've got there, but we have some bounds around how they can interact with the data. That might be good for some users, and then we'll show you some examples where we can get a lot more sophisticated in creating capabilities for other users. So to do that, let's go take a look at the next sheet in our procurement and spend application. This particular app is all around vendor spend. So this is probably the most, I'll say the second most common sheet that companies go to when they start working with the procurement and spend application. So in this environment, I'm getting a trend over where I can compare spend in the current year versus spend in the prior year and just try and understand some of the differences. And like immediately I can see March got a big difference between our current spend and our prior spend. I can look down in this table below and I can see some of the key metrics that are broken down, in this case by our vendors. Across the top, I've got different KPIs that are of particular importance to the organization. Again, total spend, breaking it down by PO and non-PO, and then seeing what's invoiced, and then still looking at our PO compliance percentage over here. I've got some statistics that can be helpful in understanding how to manage procurement and spend. But for the purposes of our demo right now, what we're going to do is I always like to take a look at this sorted at this change dollars from prior year to current year. This is where things have had the really the biggest change. I'll say dollars wise in terms of absolute value of spend. So we've had a big decrease in our TCS group holding. And then if I refilter it the other way, you'll notice that we've had a pretty substantial increase in a couple of these other products that are, or these vendors that are here as well. And again, I can click on Red Leopard. I can see where the changes are. You notice how everything changes on the fly. They're not nearly as high on the PO compliance when we're dealing with them. So I've got that key statistic. And some of this can be used to go right into a supplier scorecard. Maybe PO compliance is something that goes into that, and we've got that calculated now based on, again, non-PO versus spend, or PO spend versus non-PO spend. And if I commit that, so I'm going to click the little green box here with the check in it. Notice that for Red Leopard, I've got a couple of things going on here. Now, I've got nulls that are showing right here. So again, as John told us before, we can suppress those if we want, or we can keep them in there as a way to ensure that we've got proper data quality. But notice that I've also got two different vendor numbers associated with Red Leopard holdings. And this is a great way to have the data just tell us where there could be a problem. So there's probably a data quality scenario that's going on here. We've had a big increase this year in spend, and we've had a little bit of a decrease, but they're still buying some things. And again, it's as easy as clicking on that. Oops, let's go back here. Uncheck that. Let's click on this vendor number. So if I commit that particular number, I can go back and take a look at which buyers are associated with that. So you see how this bar is mostly gray but a little bit white? That means that of all of the buyers that are active in the system, the vast majority of them have nothing to do with this particular vendor number. So that little white bar indicates there is some buyer activity associated with it. And if I look here, it'll actually tell me Isara and Kaylee are the two buyers that are associated with this particular version of Red Leopard. And because there's only a few transactions and there's only two buyers, this would be really actionable information for me to use, because it looks like there may be an erroneous use of this vendor number, and I might want to go check into that and ensure that we get this tidied up. Okay, so that's one quick example of how you can use the power of the associative model inside Qlik to understand some data quality issues and really understand how to traverse your data just that much better. So let me do that, or take that off. I can unselect each of these one at a time, or I could clear all of them at once. And then let's go take a look at another example of what I might want to do here. I might need to find a particular vendor. Okay. So if I click on my search box here and invoke this, I have the ability to start typing, and it's doing a type ahead. If I type ANH, I get Anheuser-Busch. So if I select that, this is giving me that preview mode, right? So notice I've got some more nulls associated with it. I'm okay with that, but I only have one vendor number, so I probably don't have a data quality issue with Anheuser-Busch. Okay. So if I want to keep that selection, I hit the green check, and it'll invoke Anheuser-Busch. So now I'm analyzing Anheuser-Busch. That design is intentional so that you can use the QlikSense application with both an iPad or with a cell phone where you don't have the ability to right click. All right, so in this scenario, I want to get a little bit more insight into what's going on with Anheuser-Busch. Okay, so I've got two distinct materials that are used. I've got a lot of invoices that are open, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to traverse over to my material spend, and when I do that, key thing to note, see how Anheuser-Busch stays up here at the top? When you make a selection on one sheet, QlikSense is going to keep that in place. It's going to hold that selection while you navigate to another sheet. So here I've got my key performance indicators across the top based on material. So total spend, etc. Again, here PO compliance is also at 86%. I've got two different sets of items that are coming out with a no material tag. Again, I've got a data quality issue here. But you can see that I've got some non-PO invoices, and then I'm coming from plant PLO2. So I'm starting to get more and more information that's constructed into my model. So if I look at this and say, well, this doesn't really make sense, I want to take a look at the non-PO invoices. When I do that, I can now go to my next sheet, which is a custom report builder. So what's particularly nice about this is I can go in and I can start to configure this any which way that I want. So if I want to take items off, I can just check this. So I can check these blue boxes, they'll take them away. If I want to put items on, like description, I can put description on. Okay, again, my description here is no material. Now I might want to put a clearing document on, and if I put the clearing document on, that gives me an actual document number that I can use when I go back into SAP, and I can tie it right back to the invoice and see exactly what's on that invoice and understand why was that generated without a purchase order. Okay, because you're spending a lot of money on Anheuser-Busch and we don't have a purchase order for these items, someone's going to probably want to take a look at this. Okay. So this is a really powerful way of giving an additional amount of self-service to a user inside the Procurement app so they can do their own analysis and dig in to the data and make the best sense of it and make some decisions from it. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do one last thing in this purchasing and spend app. I'm going to take some of these out and I'm going to go back over to our vendor tab. So I'm just hitting these navigation buttons over here, and let's go to the vendor spend app. So I'm looking here, and let's just say that I wanted to look up all of the vendors that were involved or selling some type of bearing for the company. Okay. Well, what I don't have here is I don't have the ability to do a search for bearings. Not on this particular sheet in front of me. So there's two things I could do. One, I could go up and use Smart Search, and I can start to search all of my data for bearings. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to literally search across our entire data set. It's going to start to go through and look for different charts that would allow me to see bearings involved. And it's also going to go in and it's going to let me look into the different fields within the data model to see where bearings are involved. Okay. So you can see I've got two different panels of charts where bearings come into play, and I've also got different fields down here as well where you can see that the word bearings is involved in that. So this is a really powerful tool to let you go across all of your information, particularly if you're in any form of a supply chain role where you need to look up parts or descriptions of parts and try and understand where they're at. So that's one method. The other would be, well, wouldn't it be nice if I could just put a little box for description up here and search on it as well? So that's what I'd like to do, but I can't do it on this particular screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to right click on vendor spend, and I'm going to hit duplicate. So when I duplicate it, I've created my own version of this particular sheet within the application. Okay, it's under my sheets, and I'm just going to call this Sean's vendor spend. Okay, so we'll put that in there, and so now I can click on that sheet, and here I've got Sean's vendor spend, and now this is mine. So what's enabled now is I've got this edit button. So if I go on the edit button, I'm now able to look in this particular, get into kind of this canvas mode, and I can start playing with it. Okay. And in this case, I'm going to want to go into something that's been created for me called my master items. And I'm looking for a particular dimension. And I know it's called description, and it's right here. So I'm going to click on description, and I'm going to add that to the sheet. Now it gives me some information about description, what that field is, but if I just click add, it puts it right over here, and I kind of like that. That's going to be fine for me. So if I just hit done, I've now got a description field right on my sheet. And remember, we were looking for bearings before, so I'm just going to type bearings, And as I start to type it, I can see specific bearing products that come right up. So if I just take a bearing assembly new, as soon as I click on that, maybe that's not such a great idea. Let's just pick one of these reconditioned bearing clutches. See if that one pulls any of these items up. We'll add a bunch on here. See how I can click multiples? So we click on that one, we'll commit that, and I can start to do searches based on my particular items as I want. Okay. And in that particular one, it didn't have any purchases during the time frame that we had on our chart, so it's not going to be able to show us that chart that we had looked at before. Okay. But what we want to do is just give you the perspective to know that this is how easy it is to go in and make some of those changes. So when I go to this overall sheet view, let's go back here. One more time, sorry about that. So I've got my sheets. Now here's the way ClickSense works. It's going to store this sheet for me, all right? And whenever I log in, I'll have my sheet here and I can look at it. Now, you can also enable some users to go ahead and publish that sheet. And when they publish a sheet, it's going to put it out in a shared sheets panel or kind of window, or I call it a swim lane, and it would allow other users to then see the sheet that I had just created. However, it's going to keep it in that kind of quarantined swim lane so that users will know that it's not been kind of blessed and approved. And what's really, really great about this, guys, is that it allows you to have a very basic content management process for your analysis. You're empowering users to take copies of sheets, go or create a brand new sheet from scratch, use that master library to augment that sheet, create some new analysis, and then save it for themselves, and then in time maybe give them the ability to publish it and then run it through a vetting process so that it gets vetted and approved, say by a steering committee or a BI or analytics committees before it goes into your base sheets and gets added into your production application. Okay, this makes it really, really useful and a lot easier to govern in your environment. Okay, so that's the key thing we wanted to cover with the Procurement and Spend app. All right, the last thing that we'll do is we're gonna do a quick flyby on our cross-module analytics supply and demand application. All right, so this app, so again, I just click on that particular on that panel, and that's going to open up a new set of sheets for this particular application. And you can see I've got a number of production ready base sheets. You can see I've got my own sheet that I'd created earlier to combine some views. And this is, again, that outlook or that kind of high level view on everything that's going on with this particular application. So with supply and demand, this is taking purchase order data, supply data, if you will, that comes from your materials management module within SAP, and it's combining it with planned demand data that gets created when you run MRP that comes out of your production planning module. So we've got materials management data being combined with production planning data in one consolidated view to give you an 8-week kind of rolling window looking forward to understand how does my demand match up with my supply. Okay, so that's what we've got going on here. So I've got for any material in your SAP environment that has a safety stock, we're going to get this information where I'm overlaying my demand data with my supply data to give me a heads up as to whether it looks like we're going to have a production shortage issue for a particular material. All right, so I've got 8,500 materials. We've got these different thresholds here, and these are thresholds that are calculated basically how close to our requirement have we come with that particular material. So if I want to look at all of my materials that come in to up to 20% away from our targets, I've got 464 materials that get within 20% of our required targets. And then this kind of goes up from here, right? So I've got my 20 to 40%, my 40 to 85, et cetera, et cetera. And the ones that I'm most worried about, or I'll see the most opportunity for improvement in the company, is to fix materials or fix the scheduling of materials when I'm really close to what my, when my demand is very close to my supply. And I can also go on the other end of the spectrum and say, if I've got supply that's greater than 145% of my demand, I probably have a tremendous amount of excess inventory that's scheduled to come in here, and I need to do something with it. So both ends of the spectrum are great places to save money, right? Avoid problems and reduce inventory. Now, in your organization, you might be a little bit more of an effective running group, so you may want to change these thresholds. So I can just click on the change thresholds, and I'll go to this and say, nah, I run a much tighter shop, Sean, so I'm going to go down to 5%. And when I do that, it'll change my other threshold, so now I'm 5 to 40. And I'm going to say, now I want to run this a lot tighter as well, and I want to go down to 115%. So I'm going to change that. And now I just hit the supply and demand outlook button. I'm going to go back to that same view. All right, so now I've changed my thresholds. And you'll notice that I'm down to 375 parts or 375 materials that have some issues in the next 8 weeks where we're going to be within 5% of our tolerance of available inventory. Okay? So I can click on that. And when I do, I invoke that filter, and notice that my filter, everything goes red, indicating that I'm looking at just rows of materials that have at some point in the next 8 weeks I'm within that 5% target. And I can click on 1 week out, let's just do that again, and I've got the biggest culprit or biggest culprits are right here at the top. They're so bad that I actually have a supply problem coming out 1 week away. So these program supplies I'm low on. I've got some Recruit Academy supplies, admissions, et cetera, a lot of different supplies. One of them in particular, this battery, I need to get more batteries, right? So you look at this particular item, battery new, and I'm weak all the way through. So I've got total stock needs, I'm 26 below. I've only got safety stock of 20. So this is a good scenario to understand exactly just these things are really bad further out. Okay. So one thing you can do here is this is netting the numbers. So I'm looking at both supply and demand. So what we like to say is, well, let's go take a look at them and break it down one by one. So why don't I look at supply? So if I click on that particular item, I can go here and I can start to sort. Look at this, different views. And again, here I'm looking, what do I have coming in? What has been purchased? And when are those when's that supply expected to come in? And again, tell you what we'll do, why don't we go and choose that material? And we were looking at a battery before. We were looking at battery new. So when I look at that, I've got nothing. I've got nothing coming in on that. So let's go back, and I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go back real quick, and I want to make sure I select exactly the right material. So we had battery new. This is the 331. Now, if I keep that in place and go back here, I can go look at supply on that. And there's that. So I got safety stock of 20. I have 26 coming in, and then I have 40 coming in, but then take a look. My supply, I'm all zeros. So this is telling me that I need more stock coming in. So if I take a look here at my next screen, which is my demand, notice that my demand says I've got 66 needed in week 1, yet I don't have any demand further out. So I'm really close on this one, guys. If I can either change the production schedule for this and move it out a week, I could solve that problem. Or if I go back, if I could accelerate this particular or expedite this shipment and move it back in, we'd be spot on. Okay. So this is a great example of me being able to go in, look at the data, and understand exactly how to make a change operationally that's going to allow me to make an improvement in the business. Okay. Now, one last thing while we've got things going here is we're going to say, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if I could do these together? So again, this is an area where I could take an alternative view. So it's a little bit smaller. So I've got my KPIs that are done a little bit smaller. And I want to mess with this a little bit. I want to put my supply here and I want to put my demand down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to make a copy of this, duplicate it, I'm going to put it here and just call it S and D together. Do that. All right, it's just my copy of it, and I've already got, see, this is my combined view. So I'm going to edit this. I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to hit delete, take it away. Hit done. Now, what I'm going to do, this is where we get a little bit tricky. So I've got supply and I've got demand. So why don't I make a copy of both? Keep this really simple. Copy each one. I'm going to go into my supply outlook. Here it is. I'm going to take these materials off just to make this a little bit easier, guys. I'm going to click on this. I'll get off there. So I'm going to edit. Click this chart. I'm going to literally hit Control C. I'm going to go to S&D together. Hit Control V. Here's my supply. I'm going to shrink this up. Yeah, go there. I'm going to go back. See how I just navigate to supply, and now I'm navigating over to my demand outlook one. I've already got the chart built. Just hit Control C. We're going to go right back to our S&D together. I click here and hit Control V, and I pop it in. Yeah, we'll do that. Here, great. And now I've got them together. I hit done. So now if I go look at any one of these items, let's just take this guy right here. A fogging machine. Wonderful. I'm gonna put that one. Commit it. We're good. So now I get to look at this particular material side by side. So I can look at this particular insect fogging machine. I can see what my demand is. I can see what my supply is. And then I can see right away that my supply isn't going to keep up with my demand. So I'm going to have to start to increase supply on this one, particularly at 5 weeks out, in order to balance supply and demand and ensure that we keep a smooth running facility. Okay. All right. And this is, again, this is a scenario where I went in and I created this view myself. I could publish this out, add it in to a new sheet, and provide that level of analysis for everyone to be able to take advantage of in the group. Okay. All right, so that's hopefully a good example to understand just the type of data that we have access to in the SAP environment, just how flexible it can be to pull that data into these applications from SAP, from the different modules within SAP, and be able to take it and really do your own self-service on these to understand exactly what, to really get at the information that's going to be best for you to be able to make your decisions in your business environment. All right, so with that, we're going to wrap things up on this particular webinar. Again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us for this. If you do have questions that you want to pose to us, by all means, you can send me an email directly at sean@pomerolpartners.com. You can learn more by either going to our Pomerol Partners website or going to crossmodule.com to learn specifically about cross-module analytics. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now, and we hope to talk with you real soon. Take care, everyone.